Welcome back to another edition of our Health, Hope, and Happiness podcast brought to you by Stifel. On today's segment of Ask Dr. Steve, Dr. Steve Graef, owner of Mindurance, an organization for one-on-one online mental health coaching to help coaches and athletes manage their stress and enhance their performance. Today's topic is performance anxiety. So if we go by definition, performance anxiety is defined by extreme nervousness experienced before or during an activity taking place in front of an audience. So as usual, we'll examine this topic from a variety of perspectives. We'll have the coaches, the athletes, and the parents. But before jumping into the topic, Dr. Steve, I think it's probably pretty normal before an athletic event. Most athletes, male or female, have a few butterflies defined as excitement or nervousness. And of course, since we know you were an ex-football player, maybe did wrestling and track, I can't remember everything. Did you ever experience any performance anxiety before an athletic event?
Absolutely, I did. And, now I've come to realize that performance anxiety is a very normal byproduct of putting ourselves in a challenging and demanding competitive situation. If we care about something and we want to do well in something, it makes sense that we're going to have this vested stake in it and that we might get a little nervous when we're approaching that. And I like to call it actually psychological sweat, because if you were to go get a workout in, you put your body in exertion in a demanding situation, it's going to sweat. It's a very natural byproduct of putting our bodies in a challenging situation. Similarly, when we're in a challenging psychological situation, something that we care about, that we want to do well in, it makes sense that there's going to be some psychological sweat or a byproduct that comes of that. And often that anxiety and those nerves are a result of that psychological sweat. So 100% have experienced performance anxiety. I still experience performance anxiety when I go and give talks to large crowds, student athletes, organizations, because I care, because I want to do well. I want it to be well received. So it makes sense that I would experience that anxiety too.
And so right now we're going to examine the athletic side, which is right up your alley, as you just talked about. First question might not be right up your alley because we're going to talk about that team up north a little bit. But so during the 2023 football season, a lot was made of Michigan's quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, and how he spent about an hour to an hour and a half kind of sitting on the right in front of the goalpost in the back of the end zone, kind of focusing on his meditation to get him in the right mental state and relaxation before every game, not just a big game. The announcer said he often felt a lot of stress and anxiety growing up, so this helped him to be mentally fit. Do you believe this is a good way for a lot of athletes to kind of get mentally fit before a performance?
It absolutely is. Mindful meditation has been around for thousands of years. And more recently, a fellow named John Kabat-Zinn brought the kind of Eastern philosophy of meditation more into the Western self-help industry. And more research has been done on it as a result. And the data really supports the benefits associated with consistent, frequent meditation. At the same time, you got to know yourself, right? If you don't enjoy it, then you're not going to enjoy it, right? So, and I think people have some misconceptions about sitting down for an hour and having to meditate. Like if anybody without any meditation experience tried to sit down for an hour and meditate, you're going to stop immediately and you may never do it again. So just like any other muscle, interestingly, the meditation mindful muscle is one that does require a little bit of diligence and persistence as well, to go from even 30 seconds up to 30 minutes and then up to an hour. But nonetheless, it is something that if somebody does practice regularly, they can achieve a lot of overall well-being, mental clarity, focus, increased creativity. So a lot of benefits to the practice, no doubt.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I've tried it before, and just getting from 1 minute to 2 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but that extra minute sometimes uh, seems like it's taking a lot longer than 60 seconds. So um, I get building it up, just like weightlifting or anything else. You got to gradually get there.
Absolutely.
Getting back on topic, though, being a high school athlete often brings different types of anxieties and pressure. Some of that comes from themselves, some of it comes from parents, some of it can even come day of game, and all the students are talking in school about it. As we talked a little bit before, maybe even it's the coach talking about it in practice, like, this is it, this is the big game, the championship's on the line. So, how do athletes kind of block that noise out and then try to focus and stay on task?
Yeah, well, first off, there's things that you have control over as an athlete, and there's things that you don't have control over. I remember LeBron every postseason, he would disconnect from social media. So that's a thing that LeBron has control over. LeBron also probably has control over whether he looks at newspaper articles or online articles, ESPN articles about whether the Lakers or the Cavs are going to do any good, or if LeBron's going to show up or not. So he has some control over the things that he consumes, just like we all do. But there's some things that we do not have control. I mean, if LeBron wanted to end up going to a restaurant and a fan or an anti-fan yells something, he doesn't really have any control over that. He could choose not to go out, I suppose, but he doesn't really have any control over that. So this idea of blocking things out is sometimes challenging, because if your parents are saying certain things, it's not like you're going to go stay in a hotel if you're a 15-year-old athlete. So there's some things that we might not necessarily have control over. So the one thing I would acknowledge is, what do you have control over versus what do you not have control over? And if you have some control over things, yes, that you can block out, then block those things out. Okay, to the extent that you can. Get off Snapchat or whatever if you feel that that is hindering your performance. So what do you have control over versus what do you don't? And the other thing is, if there's aspects that you don't necessarily have control over, I think a really important thing is just acknowledging there's going to be some BS that's associated with me participating in sport. All right. There's going to be coaches that say this is the biggest game ever. There's going to be parents and relatives that are going to say, hey, make sure you have a really great performance. And we can get all wrapped up in that, or we can simply acknowledge that that's part of kind of the performing domain. For better or worse, it's part of the game, the gig that we're signing up for. And so then once you acknowledge it, then we can get in more to like specific tips, ways of thinking about managing some of those distractions that might pop up from time to time. That might be impossible to block out, but if you can manage them effectively and know what to do when they show up, that gives you a much greater likelihood of being able to manage them.
So some athletes get so worked up before a game, they might not be able to eat or don't want to eat. Some athletes work themselves up so much they actually get sick to their stomach and spend some time in the restroom. And then, so we know nerves are part of the game, but if an athlete is getting this worked up, thinking about performing, what is the best path for this athlete to calm their nerves without turning to medication or a substance?
Yeah, well, these are situations that I think would be benefited by talking to an expert or a professional in the field. Because we don't the simple armchair quarterback response is they're nervous because of the game, and we don't know if there's a lot wrapped up in that. Are they nervous because of the game? Are they nervous because of the opponent? Are they nervous because of the stakes of the game? Are they nervous because of who's in the stands watching them? Are they nervous because of the coach? Are they nervous because of the teammates? Are they nervous or worried about their own particular performance? So there's a lot that could potentially be going on that creates that extent of the anxiety. Um, in addition, yeah, that level of anxiety is probably not occurring in a vacuum, meaning they've lived this normal, healthy, conflict free life. and now all of a sudden they're throwing up before a basketball game. It doesn't work that way. There's probably some other historical phenomenon that has led that individual to be a little bit more anxious in general, and then certainly view athletics, maybe not deliberately, but maybe subconsciously view athletics as a prime situation for this anxiety to really show itself and blossom. So it's hard for an athlete to manage that on their own if it's at that particular level. But if they were to choose to manage it on their own, a lot of it would be trying to extract what are they actually so nervous about, and two, really spending some time on relaxation and physiological relaxation skills, not just simply before the game, but throughout the entire week, helping you to become a more relaxed self overall. So that way there's less overall anxiety when it comes to game time. But that is something I would recommend a student athlete talking to a professional about.
So today, there are many outlets that athletes have before whatever athletic contest they're participating in that didn't necessarily exist 15, 20, 25 years ago. So a lot of times, for instance, I spend a lot of time at basketball games. You see athletes with AirPods in their ear listening to their favorite music as one example. Do you feel like all these electronic devices today help athletes have a calming mindset as each athlete can tailor their music selection, their podcast, whatever it is, to calm themselves down on that bus ride to the game or during warm-ups, whether you're on a track, on a lacrosse field, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I think particularly if they're used with intention. Now they don't have to be. I mean, again, it's high school sport. If a kid listens to something just because he likes the song or she likes the song, it may or may not make or break their performance, you know. But having said that, I think if you're really looking to dial up one's performance, then using some of these things with a little greater intentionality could probably go a long way. And a long way could be a 1% better performance, could be a 10% better performance. You know, if you're in the Olympics, you know, using music deliberately to put yourself in the right mindset and energy level during a bus ride from the hotel to the venue so that you don't burn too much energy, but you're also you're not too relaxed, maybe that has a profound impact on whether they're able to shave 0.5 of a second off of a race. So they're you know, if you really want to dial that level in, there's probably a time and space for that. You know, for us in this podcast, we're helping people just be excellently average, which I'm down for. You know, I think you can live a fantastic life being excellently average. I'm living proof of that. So I think technology can have a great space if used intentionally, whether that's music, whether that's meditation applications, etc. But at the same time, if you're just on Snapchat, know that it's probably not bettering your performance. We don't know if it's worsening your performance, but it's just doing what it's doing, which is Snapchatting. So yes, technology can be something that's enhancing, but if you're looking at what critics are thinking of you, I'm thinking of like a performance actress or an actor. If you're reading what the critics are thinking of you right before you go on stage to perform Hamlet, yeah, maybe that's not a great choice, you know. So being mindful of what you are consuming before a performance is important too.
So how will learning to cope with performance anxiety as an athlete help the person as they move forward to meet life's challenges? And that could be their college career, or it could be well into later in life, their professional career.
You know, it's taken me not exactly 42 years to figure this out. I think I was hip to it a little earlier, but life is a video game. Okay. And don't worry, I'm not getting too weird with this, but like a video game has different stages associated with it. And in each stage, there's a boss that you have to beat. And the first stage is an easy stage, but you have to acquire these different resources or maybe weapons or skills or whatever. you go against the boss and you lose a couple times, and then finally you figure out, oh, I got to hit the boss in the stomach. By hitting the boss in the stomach, that's what's going to defeat that boss. So you defeat that boss and you go to stage 2. And stage 2 has a new boss. So you have to either use those existing resources or you have to acquire new ones. And so you figure it out, trial and tribulation, you fail forward, you miss the boss a few times, but eventually you get that boss. Okay, now you're on to stage 3, so on and so forth. And what I have found is that there's always another boss in life. There's just always another boss. And once you come to accept and acknowledge and appreciate actually that there's always going to be another boss, and trusting that the previous bosses that you've been through before have prepared you to tackle and conquer and beat this new boss, I think it really liberates you to this this fictitious belief that at some point I'm going to have it all figured out and there's never going to be a demand I have to face. That never happens. There's always something. Even if you're retired and you're on the beach of Key West, the demand is how much sun you're actually going to be able to take before you get sunburned. So there's always going to be something. Or where do you want to go out to dinner that night? Or the traffic's bad. Or a chicken crossed the road in front of your bicycle and you had to swerve and you injured yourself. There's always going to be something. So I think by leveraging your management skills when it comes to performance anxiety and acknowledging that it's a part of the psychological sweat and the demanding challenge that is life, I think it just sets you up for beating those bosses and progressing through those stages later on.
And so as we wrap up, there's this segment, as always, we give you a last chance to add some additional comments or material that you don't think we answered or maybe want to go back and expand upon. So is there anything else you want to add to this topic for athletes around performance anxiety?
Yeah, well, when it comes to anxiety, ultimately, there's 2 major reasons why we feel anxious: the fear of death and the fear of being alone. And you think about, well, neither of those are really evident in the sporting realm. Some are in terms of death. I mean, there are some daredevil sports that people can engage in. But what it really means is the fear of injury. So a lot of times we can get anxious about injuring ourselves. And you see that a lot in gymnastics or diving, where, you're kind of a little daredevil and flipping around a little bit. And there is that potential for getting injured. So you can see some mental blocks pop up, especially after an injury and you're trying to get back to that return to sport, which can be challenging. But then there's also this ego aspect, this fear of being alone. And that's where a lot more of this performance anxiety comes from. We don't want to feel rejected from other individuals. We don't want to disappoint other people. We don't want to disappoint ourselves. And so that's where a lot of this ego-based performance anxiety can come from. So if you start to can understand that and just relate to that a little bit and can appreciate where that's coming from, I think it can also allow athletes, even young athletes, to better manage performance anxiety when they experience it.
As always, we thank you, Dr. Steve, for your insights. Again, if you have a topic you would like for us to discuss, please let us know. Otherwise, until the next time, we appreciate you listening to the Health, Hope, and Happiness podcast, brought to you by Stifel. Thanks again.
We'll see y'all.